Shalom and welcome to another edition of Parsha Talk. I'm Rabbi Elliot Malamit in the Highland Park, New Jersey, Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation on Shemet. And joining me, my good friends, Rabbi Barry Chesler, Solomon Schechter, Day School of Long Island, Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanofsky, Anshe Chesed in New York City. We are recording this on day 580, which every time we start off with the number, we can't even believe that we're at this number. It's also today, this is the 24th day of the Omer. So that's a manageable number, 24. 7 weeks is imaginable. Um, at some point a long time ago, nothing has been manageable, and this is beyond excruciating. And the news of how many are alive, how many remain, I think is just impossible to digest for the families especially, and for all the concentric circles radiating out of that epicenter. I'm thinking of the Kikar Chatufim. I was there a couple of weeks ago, and it really pulsates throughout the Jewish world in a way that makes us all feel that we're trembling. We are trembling. We're thinking about them constantly, and devoting ourselves in prayer for their release. As we begin to think about this Parshiot, Aharei Kedoshim this week, two Parshas. Um, this is the second of two coupled Parshas, Tazria Mitzora, and this week, Aharei Kedoshim. We'll probably have more coming up this year, the way the calendar goes. Aharei Kedoshim, we are familiar with Aharei because we read most of that on Yom Kippur, a good portion of the beginning. Uh, let's focus on Kedoshim, the second of the Parsha, which we have to admit really has the content that drives a lot of Judaism, that animates a lot of Judaism. We used to spend a lot of time teaching the first verse, but importantly, um, anyone who looks at chapter 19 of the book of Leviticus will automatically kind of click into familiarity with another important document, namely the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments, Exodus 20, I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt, the house of bondage, right? You shall have no other gods beside me, no idolatry. Do not misuse the name of God. uh, uh, um, Shabbat, parents, etc. And here we have, be holy, Kedoshim to you, for I, the Lord, am holy. Ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. However we want to read that verse, we can leave that as an interpretive problem to the side. Ishim aviv tirau, each man, his mother, his father shall revere. Vet shabtotai tishmoru. We can say in general, this is about reverence for parents. This is about keeping Shabbat. And then on and on it goes. And I want to ask, I'm asking a kind of silly question, which is, I'm a Jew. I was at Sinai, a few months ago. I'm thinking like what it means to be a member of this generation. I stood at Sinai. I heard the Ten Commandments. I was terrified. And I wanted Moses only to intercede for me. And then I got a whole code after that. I can't even remember, you know, anything in that code. Okay. But I do remember some of the things in the Ten Commandments. And okay, here it's telling me this again, kind of like I had a commandment for Shabbat, and now it's telling me another commandment for Shabbat. I had a commandment for my parents, and now it's telling me another way. And so, what am I to take from the Holiness Code? How am I to relate to this? And what's the story here? What story is it trying to tell me? How is it trying to shape my understanding of who I am? Because I heard some of this, and it's going to go on, and we can go through some of this. But I want to ask, what is the posture of chapter 19 of Leviticus versus the posture of chapter 20 of Exodus? Anybody want to chip in here? Please
So
be.
I want to raise a different question. suggested by what you said.
Okay.
So we all understand that chapter 19 and 20 of Exodus is a narrative. It's like you were here kind of movie. And we have the thunder and lightning, and God descends on the mountain, and we hear these 10 great utterances, the what we commonly call the 10 commandments. But I think that we have to ask, what is the story behind Leviticus? We don't really imagine that Leviticus is going to be read to the people during their wandering, I don't think. It's kind of the whole thing is situated at Mount Sinai, but I don't see it as connected to their daily life in any meaningful way. Rather, it's kind of an abstract trying to program for the future how the Israelite community is supposed to live in their land. And I think what it does is, as you suggested, it finds a different way to say things that the people have heard before. So instead of honoring your mother and father, you're going to fear your honor your father and mother. You're going to fear your mother and father. Um, and there are other things like that too, because one of the things we do when we teach is we find new ways to say old things. Right? We're not so interested so much in new things. One of my teachers like to point out that in religion, when you want to make an impact, you don't get up and say, I have a new idea. You get up and say, I have an old idea that we need to cut back to. And, as is often the case, that old idea is really a new idea, just dressed in old clothes. But I think that the story here is focused on how individuals are supposed to get through the day and the week and the month with all the difficulties that come from living in a close-knit community.
Hmm. Jeremy, you have a take on these two codes or these two moments, and what is,
Well, if the it's a sort of a commonplace to read Exodus as this treaty. Like this is one of those things that modern Bible scholars did, is that they uncovered all these texts in the ancient Near East, and they would usually involve, or often would involve, a contract between a more powerful king and a less powerful local ruler, the vassal, the suzerain and the vassal, words we always use. And they said, listen, look, Exodus 19 really looks incredibly much like these texts. Listen, here's the deal. I took you out of the land of Egypt, and the whole world belongs to me, but I want you to be my Am Segula, my treasured people, and here's what I expect of you, and I'll take care of you, and then you do what I ask you, and then it's a deal. And there's an intensely hierarchical quality to that passage. And even though we, like, conventional Jews understand that the first commandment is, I am the Lord your God, even though it's not really a commandment, it seems like a preamble. Uh, Following Maimonides, we understand that as a commandment to you know believe that God exists and stuff. Leviticus 19, in contrast, um, is about the sacred community, and it's true, as Barry said, that you know we live together in close-knit communities. We fight. We kind of love each other. We kind of hate each other, and there's all kinds of things that we can do well or poorly. But the way I read Leviticus 19 is that you have the capacity, not, maybe unlike the tone of Exodus 19 and 20, I'm the boss and you have to follow, but you have the capacity to have an amazing society, a beautiful society, in fact, a holy society, and you can be like me, because the Lord your God, am holy, and you can resemble me. There are certain behaviors which are so refined and so ethical and so intentional, and they make a kind of art out of human life. And so I just there's a kind of tenderness to Leviticus 19, some of the specific behaviors that are supposed to happen. There's a kind of like human scale tenderness. There's like, you want to know, like Aristotle's ethics are like, you know what you want to do with ethics? What you want to find is an admirable person and figure out why they're so good. And I feel the same sort of spirit animates the Kedoshim passages of Leviticus 19. Look at excellent people, see how they behave, and here's how it is. Here's how you should behave.
Well, then let me ask you, does the focus at the first moment on family and Shabbat fit into that paradigm that you are suggesting? You're saying how to make an excellent person, how to make a beautiful person. Give them a family, put them inside a family, make the family work. Ishimo vaviv tirau is not about just being afraid of your parent. It's about reverence. It's about there is the echo of respect and honor. And of course, the rabbis will distinguish between ezu kavod, ezu mora. What's the difference between reverence? What's the difference between honor? Well, I understand that, but to put it in its broadest terms, it's you are placed in a family. Every single human being belongs to a family. Every single person is part of something larger. You have that around you, and then you have time. You're structured by your family and you're structured by time. That's a very powerful statement of how to make a person, how to make an ethical person, structured by an ordered family unit and an ordered time unit. And that time unit will enable you to live according to all of the principles and ethical ideals
I,
that
I
are.
like I like what you said about, this word fear. Reverence is a better word. And I would say, and that the beginning with, Isha vivi moti, Ishimo vaviv tirau, revere your parents, Ved Shabtotai tishmorum, revere the Shabbat, keep the Shabbat. Both of them have this like underlying assumption that some things are special and deserve reverence. And I would think that in American life, that's not what we're very good at. Um, we don't revere a lot. We tend to prefer to put people in their place than to revere them. And when we revere things, we often revere the wrong things. These things are the right things to revere.
Yeah, Shabbat. So I'm looking at this and saying, okay, Exodus 20 is one set of instructions for the ordered society, the basic principles that we all must adhere to. Here, it's taking me on a bit of a journey, which is family, Shabbat, sacred zone of family, home, sacred zone of time. All right. And then idolatry, al tifnu el elilim. Okay, we get that. Elohim asecha lo ta'asu. Don't make molten images of God. Of course, a holy society is structured on the basis of the worship of God and not idolatry. And then I want to ask this question. The puzzle that I have upon reading this now is we get verse 5, "Chit tisbechu zevach shlamim ladonai," and it takes us into the world of the zevach shlamim. It's called the peace offering, the whole offering. It's the offering that a person makes to celebrate, to acknowledge something, to in gratitude, and it's an offering that is distinguished from all the other offerings in that the person bringing it has to eat it, gets to eat it, or is allowed the privilege of eating it, and it eats it together with other people. And it says you have to eat it in 3 days. And I'm thinking like, okay, wait a minute. I have the lofty beauty of my family. I have the loftiness of Shabbat. I have the loftiness of idolatry. And now you're telling me don't leave leftovers. But it's got to be more than that. There's got to be something else going on here, and I'm looking
The
for something to hold on to here.
Yeah.
So I think what part of the answer here is what is conveyed in this chapter is a degree of intentionality that left to our own devices, things spiral out of control. In order to keep an ordered society, we constantly have to be vigilant and to withdraw into the center, as it were, so that we don't transgress the boundaries. And I think that what these laws here about the Zevach Shlamim, which is the family sacrifice, the one that's designed to be eaten by a group of people, not just the priest and God, is that we make our sacrifice and now we have to tend to it appropriately because things here could also go wrong. Even though we've done the sacrifice properly. We slaughtered the animal. We did all the steps that were necessary for its effectiveness. But now we have to eat it, and we have a limited amount of time because life is about setting limits. We can't do everything that we want. We have to subject ourselves to a greater sense of the world. And I was struck by what you said, Jeremy, that one reason why reverence is missing today is because part of the American mantra is for each of us to get ahead. And there seems to be not enough humility and humbleness, which is essential for proper reverence.
Yeah,
You certainly don't revere someone that you think you're better than.
the line that people say about the tech bros, which I don't know, although I just learned that there's a member of my shul who was Mark Zuckerberg's girlfriend in high school. Um, uh, move fast and break things. I suppose at a certain level, even though I tend to lean center left in politics, and in a sense, I'm like an Edmund Burke conservative. No, you don't move fast and break things. Things work for a reason, and you should recognize their place and find them beautiful. I personally think that I mean, obviously the no leftovers thing just begs an explanation. Like what? But as Elliot pointed out, most of the sacrifices, not a shlamim, are either burned up entirely for God or eaten by the priests. Shlamim is eaten communally. This is an encouragement to share communally. But I also think that there's a quality to all of Leviticus 19 again, which aspires to something that is beautiful, that is excellent, that is art. And if I said to you, listen, you know, spend like a week pulling off the last piece of edible meat off the carcass. That's not beautiful. Beautiful is something that's got an element of human excellence and refinement, and I think because it's the only one in his whole big book of Leviticus, which the classical Leviticus obviously being a Latinate word for the stuff that the Levitical priests do, but our classic Jewish term is it's called this book Torah Kohanim, the teaching of the rules of the priests. This whole big book is like largely about the priests and their special functions, except our chapter, Leviticus 19, about the community as a whole, not just the holiness of the priests, the community of every person, you and me. And so the one reference to the ritual stuff is to something that everyone is going to do together, male, female, young, old.
Well,
And
here, let me offer this because it's kind of what you said, which is, there is a movement in this parsha already. I have family, I have time, the zone of family and the sacred zone of time, which is Shabbat. I have idolatry, okay, which is, understanding what the moral foundation of the world, the universe is. And then I move, this is a code, or this is um, for community. This law here about consuming the festival offering or the shlamim offering within 3 days is about how you organize feasts and how you create a community. And it's a kind of bridge already to the next one, because the next law is et ketzir artzachem lo techale pe'at tzadcha. When you harvest your fields, do not harvest the corner of your field. And this is, following on what you said, Jeremy, which is the this is wherein the Torah is beautiful, in the sense of trying to enable us to create this community that understands that there are vulnerable people here, and that the vulnerable people who don't own land, who are not able to sow their fields and harvest their fields, are at least entitled to something. And so we've made the bridge from the foundations of society, family, time, God, through community to the poor person who just doesn't have what to eat.
but
So what I would
the animal, it's the leftover thing, the shlamim, does seem out of place in the chapter, but here's where it fits really in place. Um, you have to, if this is a driver to share animal food, to share meat.
Yes.
Then the next one is to share grain, and the next one is to share wine. And we believe in private property, but we expect you to use it in ways that benefit not just yourself. We believe that you have a vineyard. It is your vineyard. You can make money. You should live and be well. You should make fabulous wine, but you cannot gather every last grape. You cannot gather the fallen grapes. There are other people who need you to.
Well, are these
So
go ahead,
what I want to suggest is that maybe what the key to this chapter is about centering. We live our lives and we like to think that we're the center of our world. And in some ways, of course, we are. But what this chapter reminds us is that the true center of the community is not the I that each of us carries, but is God. And this is whom we ultimately must revere and subject ourselves to, because if we're left to our own devices, things are going to spin out of control. And that's why here the Torah has to tell us that we have to care for the poor because they are part of our community. They're as valuable to the community as we are. And if we don't take care of them, no one will. And we can't leave everything for God to do. We have to do things for God as well.
But isn't that interesting that the punctuation of these verses is, Ani Adonai Elohechem. Here's the mitzvah you got to do. I'm the Lord your God. Here's the mitzvah you got to do. I'm the Lord your God. And the mitzvot that these, maybe not every single time. I haven't checked exactly, but um, the mitzvot that chorus punctuates are social mitzvot. So is God the center? Is humanity the center? The answer is yes. That God is manifest when it's not about me, but about we. That's when God in this holiness code of Leviticus 19. I once heard the famous professor Yeshai Leibovich speak. This must have been in the early 90s. Um, and he said he first of all he had a very funny accent, funny voice. Um, and I won't try to imitate it now. I'll imitate it later some other time. But he says, "There's no okay, I'll imitate it. Ein pasuk patorah ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Ein kaze pasuk patorah. There's no verse in the Torah that says love your neighbor as yourself." And everybody in the audience is like, Professor Leibovich, I'm pretty sure there is such a verse. He says, no, the verse is love your neighbor as yourself. Ani Adonai. I am the Lord your God. And it's through the care, the caring, the generosity, that makes a holy community that you get the Lord in there.
That's very interesting. That Ani Adonai Elohechem. It's a phrase that's over a dozen or so times in this chapter. Obviously occurs elsewhere, but what you're saying then is the fact that it's appended to all of these laws that are related to interpersonal relationships. Like take the next one, Lo tignovu, verse 11, Lo techachashu, Lo teshakru ish bi'amito. Um, do not steal, do not be false, do not lie, person to his fellow. Lo tishavu b'shmi lashakar. Don't swear by my name for a falsehood. V'chilalta shem Elohecha, and desecrate my ani Adonai. So there, God is God is putting himself in the picture here, but it's all about these are situations where people are relating to each other. So what you're saying then is are you almost saying what Buber is saying, which is behind every thou is the eternal thou, which is or in relationships when we have the relationships that we ought to create among ourselves, God is present. Ani Adonai. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
No.
what I would add is that it's a way of again of shifting the center. We end up doing not what I want, but doing what God wants, and that will benefit not only me but will benefit the community. Whereas if I only do what I want, I'm not likely to benefit other people as much.
So here's the insight that I'm deriving from this, which is back to the title of the chapter, Ki Kadosh Ani Adonai Elohechem. It's hard to read that verse, the punctuation, the Masoretic notes, V'amarta Kedoshim to you, ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. The pause, the small pause is after kadosh. It's not ki kadosh ani, or is it ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem? I am is because holy I am the Lord your God, because I am holy, your God. It's hard for me to understand, and what I'm deriving from this conversation is that God's holiness is dependent on the way we talk to each other, the way we conduct each other, the way we live in our families, the way we conduct time, the way we celebrate feasts, the way we, have social interactions or conflict with one another, because that's where we're going with, in the code here, lo tekal lo tashoked re'echa lo tigzol lo talim pulat zachir itchad boker, meaning don't take advantage of your worker. You can't keep his wages. You got to pay him right away. Lo tekal el cheresh, do not curse the deaf. Lifnei ivir lo titen michshol, don't put a stumbling block in front of the blind. An viareta me'elohecha, revere God. Ani Adonai, I am God. In other words, God is present when people behave
All
to.
these human relations. Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, the Parsha includes the two love commandments. Lo tisnat achicha b'levavecha, don't hate your brother in your heart, which points towards what comes the next verse. V'ahavta l'orecha kamocha, love your neighbors yourself. And then at the end of the Parsha, if you got a stranger near you, you got to love him too. And I just this chapter just envisions a society pervaded by us at our best. By the way, it's not that the bad stuff doesn't happen, because I got to command you, because you've got some Yetzer Hara in you. You've got some, that self-aggrandizing thing, as Barry was saying. If this is primarily about advantaging ourselves, and we live here in 2025 in an American society that has serious problems with inequality, that is encouraging in so many ways a kind of rapaciousness, and you know I'll just leave it at that. Y'all can fill in the blanks of what public figures you might think are the very model of rapaciousness. But this society says, listen, I got some things I want to point you out. You're gonna feed the poor. You're not gonna exploit people. You're not going to take advantage of the vulnerable. And there's one of the mitzvot, because what comes at the end of the parsha is is the sexual prohibitions, and the specific details of those I don't really want to talk about for a second. But um, there's also in verse 29, al tchalel et bitcha lahaznota, don't turn your daughter into a prostitute.
Prostitute.
And I just I think that maybe I'm wrong here, but thinking about other cases in rabbinic literature where people were just, and just like in the world today, in impoverished countries, there are people who sell their children into sex slaves, and it's just the worst possible betrayal you can imagine. And ancient society, I'm sure poverty and starvation was like much more of a thing than it is now. And you could just imagine somebody doing this most horrible of all possible things. Don't do that. Do not
Well,
exploit people.
we have talked about the loftiness of some of the stuff at the beginning. I mean, it's not that the remainder of the parsha is not lofty, but it does relate to things of the body, and it relates to things in where people can take advantage of others, especially the most vulnerable within your own your own family. You can A father is the most powerful figure in the family and can take advantage of the most vulnerable figure in the family, namely the daughter. And that I mean that it's such a repulsive,
Bolting, yeah.
a revolting idea. Um, in addition to, I mean, we have to make an accounting in a minute or so that's left. We have kilayim, certain kinds of things that you can't wear together, certain kinds of seeds that you can't sow together, animals that you can't, yoke together. At the same time, mipnei seva takum, get up before the elderly, v'adarta pnei zaken, honor the face of your elder, ve'areta melahecha, right? So in some ways we're going all over the place, but in some ways, this is really trying to go back to the beginning, which is how do you create a holy society? How do you live up to what God wants from you, which is to be like God, right? And maybe Leviticus is trying to answer this. It's trying to answer that question, for the Kohanim earlier, up to right before this chapter, everything before this. But here's trying to answer it for you and I, for the people, right? And we get a lot of sustenance out of that. Any last words here?
Well, so the chapter is aspirational. I think Jeremy used the verb earlier, and it wants us to imagine what it is like to be like God and choose that as our course of life. It's not as much about what we want, as I said before, but about what God wants. And I think that the fact that there's so many different kinds of laws here is perhaps the seedbed of a later idea developed in mysticism that there is nothing that cannot be made holy.
Yeah.
And the chapter reminds us in a variety of ways that all sorts of spheres that we might think are disconnected from God are in fact rooted in God.
You have a lot of place in your life to live your life, but be reminded that God is present in your life in every relationship, in every interaction. And I think that's a big takeaway from Leviticus 19. Jeremy, any?
We discussed it well. I just the command about not giving your children to Molech.
Yeah.
Like this comes from a world where people evidently really did sacrifice their children. It goes along with the giving up your daughter to prostitution. But I'm just reminded of I don't know that it's a great American text, although Allen Ginsberg's Howl has the Molech section.
Yeah.
That all society has turned into this vicious thing of Molech. And I don't know.
Society still sacrifice their children to things. I'm not talking literally, but we sometimes inculcate our children into disastrous ideas and sacrifice them and use them as experiments for all sorts of ideologies. But we can leave it there, I think. At any rate.
And with
Uh,
that,
and with that, thank you so much, all those who are watching us. Our viewership, our listenership, growing every week. We're not exponentially yet. We haven't yet gone
we
viral.
haven't hit the escape velocity, but I'm still waiting for I don't know, like who's a big mogul who would reach out to us.
Somebody will one day.
Somebody will.
Mark
And
Zuckerberg's girlfriend.
Mark
yeah.
Zuckerberg's girlfriend.
Thank you so much for watching Parsha Talk, and we'll see you next week.
Shabbat shalom.
Everybody, Shabbat Shalom.